Hello, everybody. Can everyone hear me? Hi, everybody. So, good morning. Happy Valentine's Day. And welcome to episode one, season four of the Justice Youth Talk Show. Today's an episode that's introducing the newest seasons of Justice Youth and Justice Beat, along with a sneak peek at the Leadership podcast. So, my name is Rachel, and I am your host for today's episode. And I'm also an associate producer for the shows. And I am joined by my fellow associate producers, Grace and Camila. Go ahead and give a wave, you two. I got one. I saw Grace. Camila, say hi. I don't know if she can hear me. I also want to say, or I want to let everyone know that Kyle, Maddie, and Donica are here as well. They are our team leads. Say hi, everybody. I also want to give a shout out to the rest of our team who is not on camera, but they are definitely still putting in the work today. So hello to Maggie and Addie, who are our social media team. And then also shout out to our tech team, Laura and Adam, who are making this all possible right now. And of course, I cannot forget mention Elaine, who is our executive producer and program director, Carla, the senior associate producer for the Justice Youth Talk Show, and Karen, who is also on camera with us here today. Hello, Karen. And she is our senior content advisor and consultant. And thank you all for being incredible leaders in making this show possible. So before we really dive in today, I wanted to start with a icebreaker activity for all of the interns. And so I'm just going to ask you guys a question, and then we can kind of popcorn around. What inspired you to get involved with Justice Beat and Justice Youth? And we can go ahead. We'll start with Maddie.
All right. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. So I was inspired to join the Next Generation Media Internship Program and to work with each of these inspirational podcasts to be a part of a meaningful conversation about systemic barriers and injustice in our world today. And I've also enjoyed finding new ways to engage and connect with various individuals through our social media and podcasts, as well as just expanding my knowledge and competency in the justice and legal system overall. And I can popcorn to Donica.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? Perfect. Yeah, kind of going off of that, I've always been interested in how the justice system works beyond kind of what we see on the news and the media. And I wanted to better understand the connection between psychology and the legal system, which is kind of what inspired me to pursue my degree in clinical psychology, and how mental health impacts some of the court decisions we see being made. And I'm super passionate about fairness and making sure people are understood, and learning how education, housing, and access to basic kind of resources can affect someone's path in life. And so I kind of wanted to be a part of those conversations that challenge some of the stereotypes we might have, and clear up misconceptions about crime and justice. And so this podcast felt like kind of a meaningful way for me to combine my own personal and professional interests in psychology, social issues, and helping others understand some of these complex topics. So yeah, I'm going to popcorn it over to Kyle.
Hi, everybody. So for me, I think I've always been passionate about social justice, like in all forms. And that's something I know that's important to all of us here today, especially like the Adler students. Most of us chose Adler in part because it's a social justice school. And prior to me being in the field of mental health, I did a lot of work in the media, and like that's what my bachelor's degree is in. So seeing this internship where we get to talk about justice and we're utilizing media, for me it felt like my passions and like skills and interests were really coming together. So that was really exciting for me, especially with the podcast format specifically, because I know that that's something that's it's not new, but it's been a lot more popular over the last like 10 years, 5, 10 years. So it's something that's really exciting for me. And specifically with like justice impacted youth, that's something that I also want to learn more about. So I'll popcorn over to Grace.
Good morning, everyone. So I wanted to be a part of this podcast and learn more about this topic because kind of along the lines of what others were saying, I have always been interested in learning more about how the legal system works alongside with the psychological aspects of it. So kind of before researching topics and kind of hearing what people are doing in the field, in terms of justice, like I didn't really have a super good understanding of it, but I kind of wanted to learn more, and I feel like I have learned more along, this kind of journey. So, yeah. So I think I'm gonna go to Camilla.
Is everyone able to hear me? Hope so. Okay. So I was really drawn to this internship due to the desire of learning of how to work with other types of media, such as a podcast. This type of media has become really popular in recent years, and I thought it could be interesting to tie it in with some of my own personal work in the future. Also, due to its popularity, I thought that would be an interesting way to incorporate social justice themes into it and then get it out to the public.
Thank you so much, Camila, and everybody else for sharing. I will also chime in on this one. So I know as somebody who is studying counseling, I'm really aware of how much systems can shape someone's mental health and their sense of identity. So these shows, from what I could tell initially, was that they created a really good space for validation and making room for people's actual lived experiences and empowering people in that process. So these are all things I really care about as my future work as a counselor. And also, I just wanted to learn more about the criminal justice system and how it impacts people across like different areas of their lives. And I really wanted to know this because I know that this will make me a more compassionate counselor one day for all sorts of different populations. So thank you again all for sharing. So moving on, I have a fun activity for all of us today. It is a true and false activity, and I wanted to do this because education is a huge part of these shows. So I really thought it would be fun to kick off our new seasons with some just fun questions about the criminal justice system, not only to educate our team here today, but also our viewers that are here. So if you're watching, please feel free to answer these questions as well. So I'm going to read, there's 8 questions, and for each statement, everyone on camera is going to raise their hand to indicate either if they think the question is true or false. So just follow my lead. I'm going to start reading these. Okay, and I got them pulled up. Okay, so for question number 1, the United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. If you think this is true, raise your hand now. If you think this is false, now raise your hand. Okay. So the answer to this question is it is true. So as of 2023, the United States is the highest incarceration rate in the whole world, with nearly 2 million people incarcerated and about 580 people per 100,000 residents that are behind bars. I find that incredibly shocking to hear. I can see everyone's faces too. We're all a bit shocked at that information. So going on to question number 2. So racial disparities in juvenile incarceration have vastly decreased in recent years. If you think this is true, raise your hand. If you think this is false, raise your hand. So the answer is false. As of 2023, Black youth were 5.6 times more likely to be detained or committed in juvenile facilities as their white peers. So this is undeniably a huge disparity that is currently going on. Let's see. Okay, so now going on to question number 3. The majority of people in prison meet the criteria for substance use disorder. If you think this is true, raise your hand. If you think this is false, raise your hand. So the answer is true. Approximately 65% of the US prison population has an active substance use disorder. Another 20% did not meet the criteria, but they were under the influence of drugs or alcohol at the time of their crime. I know for me, hearing this information, knowing that this is a treatable disorder, imagine kind of what good targeting this disorder could do for the populations that are impacted by this. All right, on to number 4. Reentry programs that include mental health support improve long-term outcomes for those impacted by the criminal justice system. Do we think this is true? If you do, raise your hand. If you think this is false, raise your hand. So the answer for this one is true. Reentry programs that include behavioral and mental health support show that with this support, individuals are up to 38% less likely to return to prison. And in addition, significant improvements in mental health, substance recovery, housing stability, and employment are reported. Okay. Going on to question number 5. The majority of youth held in detention centers are there for violent crimes. If you think this is true, raise your hand. If you think this is false, raise your hand. So the answer is false. In 2024, only 8.5% of youth arrests were for offenses categorized by the FBI as Part 1 violent crimes. And this means aggravated assault, robbery, rape, or murder. So this certainly breaks a lot of stereotypes around what being a violent offender looks like and who's actually in these systems. Going on to number 6. So juvenile records are automatically cleared when someone turns 18. Do we think that this is true or false? So raise your hand if you think it's true. Okay, raise your hand if you think it's false. The answer is false. So record expungement varies state by state. So this is not always automatic and it is very law dependent. Right, number 7. Providing educational resources to incarcerated individuals increases their chances of employment post-release. If you think this is true, raise your hand. If you think this is false, raise your hand. So the answer is true. Incarcerated individuals who participate in correctional education were 13% more likely to have post-release employment. And not only that, they were 43% less likely to return to prison. And we are at our last question. So mass incarceration affects not just the people in prison, but also their families and communities. If you think that this is true, raise your hand. If you think this is false, raise your hand. The answer is true. Incarceration is linked to higher risks of poverty, school difficulties, and behavioral mental health issues for children of incarcerated individuals. And this negatively contributes to far-reaching social and economic strain in communities. So from what I could tell, everyone did pretty good. If you got them all right, then you have bragging rights forever that you did really well in this game. So thank you all for playing. I hope people learned some things, not just you all, but some of our viewers. And with that, we are going to take a quick commercial break.
Introducing Next Generation Media Internship Program, designed for undergraduates, postgraduates, unemployed, dislocated workers, and WIOA participants. Our program offers remote virtual work experiences, qualifying as approved individualized career services. Learn while leading at your own pace, with part-time or full-time hours per week. Benefit from weekly debriefings and group supervision, along with our 15-minute masterclasses. Our projects include the Justice Beat Talk Show and the JustUS Youth Talk Show. Discover your gateway to success today.
All right, everybody, welcome back. All right, so now we are going to get into previewing our seasons that are coming up. So we are going to start with JustUS Beat. So I'm going to hand that over to Donica and Grace to talk about the upcoming season.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay? It's a little laggy on my end, I apologize, but yeah, so I'm super excited about this upcoming season for the JustUS Beat Talk Show. If you guys tuned in last week, we did a little overview episode as well of what's to come. So I'm going to summarize a little bit about, kind of what our goal is for this season and some of the exciting speakers we have coming up. So just to start off, JustUS Beat is a podcast that kind of looks at how the criminal justice system works in everyday life and how individuals that are impacted by it, individuals are impacted by it. And so it kind of breaks down some legal topics, kind of in a clear, easy to understand way for our viewers to be able to connect and get that information from our episodes and our speakers. And the show covers policing, legal decisions, and some court cases as well. And a major focus this season is mental health, including how psychological evaluations can affect trial and court outcomes. And it also looks at bigger issues connected to the justice system, like education, housing, and access to basic necessities. And so the podcast also explores how things like unstable housing, limited resources, or lack of educational opportunities can influence someone's path kind of long before they actually enter the legal system. And so it encourages us to have honest conversations about fairness, accountability, and what meaningful change can look like or could look like. And so our guest speaker for next week on the show will be Dr. Erica Miners. She is a professor, and she kind of what she focuses on is education in prison systems, because education kind of sits at the center of how we think about punishment, rehabilitation, and the possibility of change. And so we know that across the country in prisons and jails, education is oftentimes limited or inconsistent. And so her work centers around being able to kind of get those resources to incarcerated individuals or previously incarcerated individuals. And then the following episode will take place with Dr. Alexandra Tsang, who is a forensic psychologist for Kane County, and she is currently the director and chief psychologist for the diagnostic center there. And so she has about 26 years of forensic psychology experience under her belt, and she kind of focuses on conducting fitness to stand trial assessments, sanity evaluations, custody evaluations, and so on and so forth. And so she has also facilitated kind of establishing programs for juveniles in detention and trains court service personnel on several topics. So we're super excited to have those speakers on the show. I will pop it over to Grace, who will talk about the final 2 episodes on the JustUS Beat.
Yeah, so I was really focused on episodes 4 and 5, and I'm really excited. We have 2 really amazing women who we're going to have on, Lisa Daniels and Paula Bush. So on episode 4, we have Lisa Daniels, and she is a nationally recognized leader in restorative justice, and her work focuses on healing communities impacted by violence and incarceration. So that's a really fun episode to look forward to. And then Paula Bush is actually the CEO of an organization called Northwest Housing Partnership. And essentially what they do is when people leave from incarceration, oftentimes they do not have somewhere where they know they can go to live and feel safe. So really what she does and what the organization does is find homes for people and make sure that they will be able to stay in their homes and become back involved in their community. So I'm really excited to kind of learn more about these women and the work that they do.
And we have a question for you all. Kind of how can the Justice Beat foster understanding and dialogue around incarceration?
I can go ahead and start. So, my thoughts when immediately looking at this question, hearing about this question, is just thinking about how by providing personal stories of individuals who have been incarcerated or family members of incarcerated individuals, this can provide us understanding and allow us to combat the stigma that is surrounding incarceration. And by having these conversations with our guests, as well as individuals with lived experience, we can foster this meaningful dialogue to address the barriers individuals may face during or after incarceration, including those related to employment, housing, education that you guys just discussed when reviewing your episodes. And I can go ahead and popcorn this over to Camila.
Hello. So, my thoughts on this are through the utilization of speakers who work in the system and understand it. I think that this will assist in understanding as well as dialogue. The individuals on the podcast speaking about the topics helps the audience go beyond just research and it becomes more of a teaching moment. It could be similar to how things are taught in a classroom, but through the use of a podcast where it can be listened to anywhere. And I can popcorn this over to Kyle.
Yeah, so I would piggyback off of what Camila just said, how the guest speakers kind of just give it more more of like real meaning beyond the research because we have people who are either really experts or who have had experiences with the justice system firsthand. So that's something that I think is really big. Honestly, just having these conversations in the first place is a good start because a lot of times in a lot of environments, we consider talking about like the justice system taboo or like we shouldn't really talk about that. So I think that even having those conversations is good. But like all of us sitting here, a few of us just said we want to learn more about the topic. So most of us, we have like degrees, college degrees, maybe master's degrees, and we're either in social justice or very adjacent to it. So I think the average person doesn't even know a lot of that stuff that we might know from like our being in the field. So it really just goes to show we need to keep talking about this. So even having those discussions, period, is going to be really helpful.
Wow,
Uh,
everyone, fantastic answers. So to say, did anyone else have thoughts on this? I have some thoughts on this, so I can jump in and finish this question off. I think just tying into everything that everyone said, I think that Justice Beat really expands like the conversation away from punishment and exploring restorative approaches um, that focus more on like accountability and healing. And I think when we're all exposed to these alternatives, it opens up a space for new ideas and we can talk about these issues and when we talk about these issues it helps us to like picture something different um, and kind of moving away from getting stuck on the problem, so it creates a lot of space for like imagination around these things and sort of looking for different solutions. So that's what I think of when I think about Justice Beat and the potential with that. Thank you all for talking about this new season that's coming up. I'm really excited to see it come together and to hear from these speakers. Um, Going from here, we're going to jump into the JustUS Youth Show. So me and Kyle will be talking about this show today. I'll kind of get us started on this. I quickly wanted to talk about what the JustUS Youth Show really is for anybody that might be listening that needs a refresher, or maybe you haven't listened before. So the JustUS Youth Show, it's a podcast that creates space for conversations around youth criminal justice. So it brings young people together to explore and kind of advocate with the community members to talk about things like alternatives to detention and what those conditions are like for incarcerated youth. Um, and it's a way for there to be like better support for young adults as they re-enter into these communities or into their communities. And most importantly, I think the main thing with the JustUS Youth Show is that it brings youth into the conversation when usually they aren't a part of the conversation. These things are just kind of happening to them and they can't have a voice. So that's sort of what's going on with JustUS Youth. I'll hand it over to Kyle. She'll have a few thoughts on things as well.
Yeah, so I know we had some questions about like conversations we feel are especially important right now. And I think that's part of what we decided to do our episodes with. It's a combination of things, but it's like our passions coming together. Maybe things that we feel like people don't know enough about, or things that we feel like we all want to learn about or need to learn about, but even conversations specifically that are really important, like the conversation around ICE and what that might mean for youth. Like that's something that is really necessary right now. And just with like our guest speakers and what we have planned, I'm really excited for that. So I'm excited for everything. And I guess I can just get into like the next episode. So we're going to be talking about animal assisted therapy for youth who are incarcerated. Um, so this is one of those ones that started from passion for me because I do have a certification in animal assisted therapy, but it's kind of like everything lined up really beautifully because the person who I did the certification under, Dr. Kakasik, has a lot of experience working with youth who are incarcerated with animal assisted therapy. So she's really great, really knowledgeable, and super down to earth. So I think it'll be great to just hear from her, not just about animal assisted therapy, but specifically like for people who are like currently incarcerated and youth specifically. So I think that's something maybe some of us have heard about for the population, but it's definitely not something that everyone's doing. So I think it's going to be really interesting just hearing more about how that kind of program works and, what the benefits could be. So it would be great, I'm sure, if even more facilities utilize something like that. But even just us sitting here learning more about the benefits, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited about that episode. We'll probably be jumping back and forth because we're covering different episodes, me and Kyle. So, our next episode for the season is titled ICE and Action Steps for Youth. And we really wanted to talk about this topic this season. This is very relevant right now with what is going on in our world. So, the episode's pretty much going to break down who ICE is and what's going on and what rights youth have during these immigration encounters. And we are featuring a guest who is with the National Immigrant Justice Center, um, who is very much an expert on this topic. And our sort of hope with it is to like empower young people and give them knowledge with what's going on and safety strategies, and also to help their peers that might be going through something with this. And I'll hand it back off to you, Kyle, to talk about the prison pipeline episode.
Okay. Yeah, so I think for a lot of us on this topic, I know myself, one of my earliest like conversations that I really got into was like the prison pipeline. So we talk about like school to prison pipeline. And if some of you aren't familiar with the term, it's really just about how different practices can set up the kids to go straight into like prison after school. So instead of setting them up for like careers or education, there are different factors that start when they're still in school, and it sets them up to almost just go straight through like into prison. So I think this is one that's going to be really helpful. Dr. Stoner Harris was also faculty at Adler University. She's done research on how this pipeline impacts specifically Black girls. So I think it's going to be really good to hear more about their research. And I know she's going to have insight on other factors. So I know school is one of the main ones, but then we have other things too, like foster care, we have disability, and maybe even like the quality of education too. Poverty, I know, is a big one. So I think it's going to be really good to talk to her and learn more about that topic. And it'll be helpful for us who are looking for ways we can continue to advocate, and then also just for prevention and learning like, okay, what kind of things can we keep an eye out? Are there any things that we can change ourselves or that we can continue to advocate for across these systems? So I think that's really exciting. And another episode Rachel's going to tell us about, I think the next one is really important too.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, so our fifth episode this season is titled Neurodivergent Youth in the Criminal Justice System. So this episode is really exploring the experiences of neurodivergent youth. So these are individuals that are experiencing autism, ADHD, learning disabilities, and how, you know, in the justice system, if they're dealing with misdiagnosis, maybe misinterpretation of their symptoms, or generally just mistreatment going on, kind of how that's all intersecting and impacting these youth. We're going to have insight from a youth facilitator or a youth facility professional or a research expert. And the episode's really going to highlight why these young people are so often misunderstood and what can be done to sort of create more safety for them in this system. And I will hand it back off to Kyle to talk about our final episode for the season.
Yes. So we wanted to focus on like technology in some way. And I think initially we were like, how can we do this? And I got to shout out Rachel again because she found this incredible organization where youth who are just as impacted learn about filmmaking. So it's called Echoes of Incarceration. So we've been talking to them, hopefully to have them a part of that last episode. It's a really great organization because the youth come together and they learn about filmmaking and they work on documentaries, and they're learning real skills. It's not just like they're talking about it, they're actually learning this, and they also have like their personal experiences along the way. And their social media, if you take a look at it, you can hear more from the youth too. So I think this one is really exciting, and we would love to have one of the youth on for that episode as well. So this is one of those episodes I think that we talk a lot about what could be helpful for youth who are just as impacted. Are there things that we can do before or after this connection or situation happens? So we can help them to know life isn't over here and they can still do things that are great. And we're really looking forward to that. And Rachel, I think, wants to ask a question to other people here.
Yes, I do. I have a little discussion question for us. So, kind of thinking about the season, now we've just heard about it. How can episodes be relatable and empowering for young listeners? How can that work with this season?
I can go ahead and start out. I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for that rundown. We are so excited to learn more about these topics and talk more about them for this season. But specifically when I'm thinking about the ICE episode and just being in Chicago right now, obviously this is happening across the country, but especially being in Chicago, it does feel very close to us right now. And when youth are informed of safety measures or their rights, we can empower young people to feel confident about how to act when faced with injustice or unjust behavior from others. And when you are prepared, you're more likely to feel comfortable and safe and confident in what to do. And the listeners may also find a community through our show where they may relate to many individuals facing similar situations. And as Rachel mentioned in the beginning, when giving an overview to the JustUS youth, many youth are left out of these conversations. So finding that community in our show, I think, is a very important aspect to what we do.
Oh, Karen, do you have some thoughts on this?
Yes, thank you. I do. And much like what Madison just said, I think this layout of all of the topics is amazing. I'm very excited. I think you all have done an awesome job being well thought out topics that are going to draw people in. So when I think about what can we do to make the topics and the information relatable, I'm always thinking in terms of making sure that as we provide the information for young people, it is digestible. So, often, conversations can be highbrow and young people trying to find a way to get in to participate in discussion. So staying focused on how can we give young people information that is going to make sense to them, that is broken down as far as it needs to be, that they can take it and then have discussion among their friend groups. And so I think when we talk about being relatable, it's also why there's the great benefit of involving people who either have lived experience, and I don't know if there's a capacity to have that on some of the shows, but when you have someone with lived experience that is also closer in age to the young people, I mean, that has a tremendous impact. So for me, I'm always thinking about whatever I give, it's got to be easily digestible. It's got to be on their level and something that is definitely engaging. And I think you all have done an excellent job with the topics that you all have selected for the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Karen, for that insight. And I completely agree with that. Making this all digestible enough for youth to be able to confidently carry this into their spaces and to keep talking about these things. Did anybody else want to jump in for this question? Did anyone else have any thoughts? All right, let's go on to, well, this is going to be a really exciting part of the show. We are going to do a sneak peek into the leadership podcast. So with that, I'm going to hand that over to Maddie and Camila to talk about this show coming up.
All right, very exciting. So the Leadership Podcast is the new podcast that we are introducing this year, and Camilla will release our release date for the show. But just to give you guys a little idea about what the leadership is and the idea behind creating this podcast. The Leadership is a thought-provoking podcast dedicated to exploring leadership, community empowerment, and innovative strategies for fostering positive change within organizations and society at large. And by using C-themed episodes, we plan to dissect strategies, share insights, and engage with transformational leaders who are steering their teams into power or success during uncertainty and change, and confidence during this uncertainty and change. We dive into critical topics such as transformational leadership, effective mentorship, the importance of collaboration, and the role of creativity in driving social change. Our goal is to empower the next generation of leaders and apprentices alike, equipping them with the knowledge, skills, and inspiration they need to make a meaningful impact. And I will pass it over to Camila to talk about our release date.
Thank you, Maddie. So we plan to release the Leadership Podcast on October 8th at 8 p.m. And as we are still in the early stages of developing the Leadership Podcast, we don't have any guests secured, but we have very exciting ideas and are looking forward to sharing more about these guests in the near future. So I think that when we were discussing, it's going to be on the 8th of every month at 8 p.m. So that's kind of how the run of shows is going to work out. Back to you, Maddie, about some of the episodes that we are currently in the process of creating.
So we wanted to share a little bit about what our episodes would look like in the first season of sharing the leadership podcast with you all. So the first episode that I wanted to share that I'm excited about is well-being in leadership. And this episode is going to be all about the culture of safety in the team. And this episode is centered around the theme grace and space, leading with grace and intentionally creating space for new ideas, honest feedbacks, and even mistakes along the way, as we know that can happen. We will talk more about empathy and encouragement and how they can build trust within each team and each leadership dynamic. Another episode that I wanted to talk about is strengthening the fleet. So this episode shifts the focus from power of the leader to the strength of the crew. And we will discuss how great leadership is about building collective strength and recognizing the individual strengths of each team member to foster collaboration. And in this episode, we'll share some team building exercises that we thought might be engaging and interesting and can also be implemented at little cost if individuals wanted to bring this into their space. And another episode that I would like to discuss is the lifeboat episode, which is the preparation before the storm. So the theme for this episode is that lifeboats are prepared before the storm. So we'll talk about crisis management in the workplace, how to put common plans into place, how to respond instead of react, and how preparation allows leaders and teams to feel confident in uncertainty. And Camila did want to talk about an episode that she's also excited about coming up, so I'll hand it over to Camila.
Thank you, Maddie. So one of the episodes that I'm looking forward to seeing in the future touches on the topic of creating strong connections in leadership and mentor/mentee relationships. I think that this episode will be super insightful due to many high schoolers, college students, employers, supervisors, employees have to work in these roles. This episode will feature a knowledgeable speaker that will build off of some of the research being done to further speak on the topic. I just think this is going to be really interesting because a lot of us Adler students are going to have to be in these different roles, and just understanding how to create strong connections in these relationships, I think is just going to be super interesting for not even just our viewers, but also just for us. And the last bit that we have is some exciting news that I'm going to let Maddie share.
All right. So last but not least for the leadership podcast, just to wrap up our little segment here, I wanted to let you guys know to watch out for an upcoming interview with our captain of the leadership, Elaine. In this interview, we will dive into the depths of what leadership means to her and her experience of building this inspiring brand. We'll discuss some potential guests with her, as well as going more into depth in these episode topics that Camila and I just mentioned. And we're so excited to support our fellow team members as they launch their episodes for the Next Generation Media Internship Program.
Wow, thank you guys for talking about the upcoming season. That was great. I'm so excited for that episode with Elaine. I love the leadership, the captain. It's very fun. So looking forward to that episode, as long with others that come up in the future. Thanks again for sharing all of that. We are heading towards the end of our episode today. We have a few more things to go over, but I really wanted to talk about how today the whole goal of this was to really set a tone for this upcoming season. We talked about Justice Beat, where we break down how the criminal justice system really works and explore topics like mental health, education, behind bars, restorative justice, re-entry. We talked about Justice Youth, which really prioritizes young voices and provides young people with knowledge about their rights, current social justice issues, and how to navigate re-entry successfully as a young person in our culture. Finally, we got our sneak peek at the Leadership Podcast, which is in development, but it's going to focus on collaboration and mentorship and leading with strength and empathy, which I think is very needed in our world right now. It's a very relevant topic. And speaking of setting the tone for this season, we really want to reflect on justice reform. And with that, I'm going to hand over the mic to Karen to share a few thoughts.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate that handoff and introduction. So, again, as the senior content advisor and consultant, I am a clinical social worker, and I'm often just trying to find ways to enhance the conversation. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but just to add to it. And then also just to sort of, as Rachel has just said, and I think all of the interns have said, sort of shape what the season will look like. So I would like to highlight that justice reform, we all pretty much know is very necessary, or for the most part, most of us agree that it really is necessary to address systemic issues that are frequently rooted in bias, prejudice, and discrimination. And justice reform also is needed for some very specific reasons I'm going to highlight real quickly. One, I think early on, I think the first question talked about mass incarceration. So I'm just reiterating that the United States has the world's highest incarceration rate, holding nearly 25% of the global prison population, despite having only 5% of the total population. So that's a big chunk. And so what does that really mean? And what does that look like? And what direction are we headed if we continue at this pace? Also, systemic racial disparities. People of color are disproportionately affected at every stage of the system and currently account for 25% of all adult arrests. And just in general, African Americans are incarcerated at 5 times the rate of white Americans. And so there's a lot for us to look at there, to look at all of the reasons. What are the things that are impacting that? Again, I think a lot of the questions that you all posed early, the true or false, really speak to what I'm highlighting right now. This next one is also really big, economic burden of our current system. So incarceration, as we know, is incredibly costly, with the U.S. spending roughly $80 billion annually on prisons and jails. So if we factor in also legal fees, court costs, and things of that nature, the total cost is much, much higher. And so what we do know is also, sometimes we don't look at it this way because it's such a broad perspective and it does not always translate to our day-to-day. But statistics also show that $87 billion is lost in the annual gross domestic product, and that is because of a reduced workforce. And so we do understand that often when people are released from their incarceration, depending upon their crime, certain charges, they would not be able to get certain professions that require license, and all kind of restrictions about what kind of employment fields you can go into. So if you didn't receive any education while you're incarcerated, and then your crime does not allow you access to a certain field, when people are released, we're looking at a total reduced workforce at that time, but it's also reduced while they're incarcerated. So that's a tremendous impact. And then in general, I think there was also a question that you all had that sort of spoke to like what happens when someone's incarcerated and the things that contribute that would help remove or reduce future incarceration. So ultimately, there are high recidivism rates. We know this, we see it, the stats show it. And the current system focuses on, we understand punishment. And this is where I come in as a clinical social worker. I understand people sometimes think we're just Pollyannas and we just want everybody to just be kumbaya. I believe in and I understand crimes are committed and everybody wants accountability for crime. No problem with that. We need to have accountability for our actions. But our focus, when it is solely just punishment rather than rehabilitation, doesn't do anything but lead to higher rates of reoffending, because we have not really addressed those underlying conditions that may have contributed to someone making a choice that landed them in jail, in incarceration. So we also know, just in general in this country, we struggle with the concept and the application of restorative justice. So yes, we understand it's a new concept. But because of how we incarcerate, and we've been on this path for a long time, it is always hard to introduce something new. Like, hey, we've got to just pause and try to figure out, is there some other way to address crime that does not require us to just punish for long lengths of time and not provide any rehabilitative services, and then have the expectation that someone's going to get out and just reacclimate and be okay and not have challenges. So restorative justice is something that we have to continue to talk about. because effective reform should really aim to provide education, job training, as you all said earlier, mental health support to help those who are currently incarcerated to prepare for their departure, but also for the formerly incarcerated individuals who are attempting to successfully reintegrate into society. So there are a lot of areas where there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And I'm going to wrap this up. I promise you I'm not going to talk you to death. But also, one of your questions talked about the impact on families and communities, and it's great. And statistics show that 1 in 2 U.S. adults have had some kind of immediate family member who has been incarcerated. So people say, well, that's a lot. So when that specific statistic is speaking to whether it's a brief overnight stay for some small arrest where they were booked and went to jail and stayed overnight, all the way up to long-term incarceration. So when we look at that 1 in 2 adults, it's looking at all of the possibilities and all the ways a person can be incarcerated. It's not always long-term. And then just in general, 14% of U.S. adults have personally themselves experienced incarceration. Now, I am, again, more focused on the JustUS show. So what I will say is 18 to 29-year-olds are nearly twice as likely to have had a parent incarcerated compared to other age groups. So then we also have to talk about what kind of impact is that on that young person. And also I think about those who are familiar with ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. You know, having a parent that is incarcerated, having these this housing instability and frequent moves, or growing up in a household where there's a parent with unaddressed mental health, unaddressed substance, or growing up in a home where there's abuse. All of these ACEs, this right here is a pretty significant one. To have a parent that was incarcerated at any stage of your formative development, that's going to be incredibly impactful. So this separation obviously traps a lot of families in this cycle of poverty and instability that we've got to find a way to interrupt. And then I'm just going to wrap up with this. You know, lastly, we are all very aware of the ever-expanding problem of the criminalization of poverty. That can go in all kinds of directions. One of the things that is a big concern or thing for me that sticks in my craw, I'm in Georgia, is that our current minimum wage is $5 and something cents, still from years ago, but the federal wage overrides. So minimum wage here, people are being paid $7.75. That's not a livable wage for anyone. And so when we think about the criminalization of poverty, when we don't look at what needs to be done systemically to require an increase in the minimum wage across the board in the entire country, if we want people to be able to live independently, we understand that there's always going to be varying skill sets and developments among people. Everyone's not going to be a lawyer. Everyone is not going to be a teacher. We need all fields, but people need to have a living wage. So when we think about the criminal justice system and justice reform and all of this, the criminalization of poverty is really a big piece that is really, really growing. And so we're going to be highlighting all of these issues as best we can. We obviously cannot fix everything, but again, I'm going to take my own advice and try to find a way to present information that is digestible so that anybody watching us can walk away with something and then find some place to, what I like to say is, put their hand to the plow and get to work and not look back, because really all of this is about information and then advocacy. So thank you for the time, Rachel. I appreciate it. I hope I use my time wisely. And I love all of the work that you all have done. So thank you for all of your work. It is already shining and showing.
Karen, thank you so much. That was so powerful to hear your statement on this, and something that we definitely, all of these themes are things we want to carry through the seasons of all of these shows, just to carry with and always keep in mind. I also really appreciated your research, giving a very realistic view of what's actually going on. So there's no sort of questioning, is this happening or that? These are facts. These are things that we can really look at and, you know, work with and problem solve from. So after hearing all of this and everything today through our episode, you might be wondering as a listener, what can I do to make a difference here? And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you some ideas on things that you can do. First of all, reflecting on your own assumptions about crime, incarceration, and justice. This is always good insight to sort of challenge where you're going with these things, so that you can also provide more accurate information to people when they're asking you. Another thing is to continue to educate yourself on the criminal justice system and seek out stories from people with lived experiences. I know this came up quite a bit today, with like lived experiences within these systems. And, you can do this by watching this season and also going back to past episodes. We have a lot of really good episodes out with a lot of folks with lived experiences. And then finally, you can speak up. You can use social media or conversations to bring attention to injustices when you see them. So these are all things that you can do as a listener, to make a difference. And so with that said, before we say goodbye today, I wanted all of us to go around and give kind of a quick reflection on what we hope listeners take away from the upcoming seasons. So does anybody feel like they would like to start?
I can start. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So ultimately, I want listeners to feel more informed and empowered and equipped to think critically about crime and justice, and also to engage in meaningful conversations and see the legal system through a more human and psychologically informed lens.
Anybody that wants to jump in, go ahead.
I can
I can go
quickly
next.
jump in. Oops. Camilla, do you want to go ahead and jump in?
You're all good. You can go.
Okay. Just kind of bouncing off of that, and kind of working on the Justice Beat show with Grace, I think that I also kind of want people to understand that the justice system isn't just about crime and punishment. It's also about mental health, education, housing, access to basic necessities, all of that goes into supporting an individual either going through the system or rehabilitating. And so I hope that listeners can recognize how many factors actually shape someone's path. And again, kind of challenge some of those common misconceptions or stereotypes we have about justice and crime. And yeah.
Okay, I can go next. From the Leadership Podcast, we hope that listeners firstly gain new knowledge and understanding of different components of what it is to be a leader and work with a team. We hope that they see it from a different point of view than what society has taught when it comes to what a leader is. On top of this, we are also hoping that it is learned from a social justice lens where systemic barriers in leadership are challenged and a more inclusive environment is created.
Just overall, something that I was thinking about throughout this episode is that I hope that listeners may be able to find a community within any of the shows that they're listening to, whether this is just meeting others that relate to them in different ways or hearing about lived experiences. And I think that any of these podcasts can be inspirational and give that sense of community to our listeners.
So I would say I want people to be able to view like the justice system and even incarceration specifically as more than just like a binary of, okay, are people good or bad? But to think of it more so like, okay, what led us here? And then even beyond that, like what Karen mentioned, what about restoration? So thinking about those things too, and maybe even picking up something that could be a point of advocacy for them too.
Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing. I don't know, Karen, did you want to jump in with anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I love the takeaways about leading people toward advocacy. And so that's really sort of my hope, that people get enough information that they are not just compelled, but are excited about taking action and then beginning to advocate. one of the things that is always a great concern for me is that the population that's usually most impacted by the criminal justice system does not do a great job of self-advocacy. It's usually someone advocating on their behalf. And a lot of that has to do with a person's level of legal knowledge about their rights and then their own confidence to speak up for their own well-being. And so that's my hope, that people find something to walk away with that will allow them to then become greater advocates for themselves and their community.
Thank you. Yeah, and I know for myself, echoing kind of everything everybody has said already, I guess my hope is that people are inspired and that they can go home and talk about these issues, and feel like empowered to do that. So, with that said, I think we are kind of a little over on our time. So, this is our goodbye. So, thank you all for joining us for episode 1, season 4 of the JustUS Youth Talk Show. Be sure to follow, subscribe, and stay tuned for upcoming episodes of JustUS Feed and JustUS Youth. And keep an eye out for the Leadership Podcast that's coming out this fall. So thank you all again, and goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Well done, everyone. Well done.